The first sound that tore out of my chest when I stepped down from my truck was not reason or strategy or diplomacy. It was instinct, raw and unfiltered, the kind that only shows up when something older than you is under attack. And I yelled across the dirt road with dust still clinging to my boots, "Get off my land," expecting confusion, denial, maybe a nervous laugh. But instead the man in the hard hat barely looked up from his clipboard, adjusted it like this conversation had already happened in his head, and calmly told me that the land under my feet no longer belonged to me. A sentence so casually delivered it felt like a blade sliding between my ribs. I had just come home from 6 months overseas, buried inside a high-risk cybersecurity contract that kept me awake through time zones and threat matrices instead of sunsets and soil, and all I wanted was to drive back through the open gates of Blackridge Ranch, feel the Colorado wind roll across open ground, maybe ride the eastern fence line my great-grandfather built when this place was nothing but stubborn earth and prayer. But instead I was standing in the middle of survey stakes stabbed into the ground like accusations, bulldozers idling over wheat fields my family had planted for 4 generations, engines rumbling next to the small hill where my father was buried, now wrapped in bright orange tape, like his grave was just another obstacle on a development plan. They handed me documents thick with confidence, pages stamped, signed, notarized, papers stating that my ranch had been sold while I was overseas, 12,000 acres officially, 15,000 in reality once you trace the boundary lines, transferred through the Silver Creek Estates Association, approved by the county, finalized in court. And when I saw my name printed cleanly across the page with a signature that looked almost like mine, my stomach dropped because I knew with absolute certainty that I had never signed anything. And that certainty was the exact moment shock hardened into something far more dangerous. I drove straight into town, past buildings that had always felt small compared to the ranch, and walked into the glass-walled offices of the HOA where Evelyn Crown, the president, waited behind a desk polished so perfectly it reflected her composed smile, a smile that told me she believed the outcome was already decided, and she explained everything slowly, patiently, like she was guiding someone toward acceptance. How a power of attorney authorized the sale, how Judge Raymond Keller had reviewed and approved the transaction, how development was progress, how my land was underutilized, how fighting it would only prolong my pain. When I said the word forgery, her expression shifted instantly, warmth draining from her eyes, replaced by something sharp and procedural, and she warned me about defamation, about legal consequences, about the dangers of making accusations without proof. And when I walked out of that office, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that this wasn't just theft. It was a coordinated system designed to make resistance feel pointless. That night, I stood alone in the old barn, surrounded by photographs of men who had broken their bodies to keep this land alive. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and I promised them silently that I would not let their work be erased by paperwork and arrogance, not knowing yet that the HOA had already made a mistake so catastrophic it would eventually cost them everything they owned. The days that followed felt like being slowly buried by procedure and power. Temporary restraining orders appeared overnight. Armed security blocked roads I had driven since childhood. Machines crept closer to protected ground, while my complaints vanished into silence, and every official door I knocked on seemed to close faster than the last. The only steady voice came from my mother, Helen Brooks, who reminded me that my father had never trusted the HOA, who told me to check the old safe hidden behind a loose panel in the ranch office, the one most people forgot existed. And when I opened it, I found the deeds, the tax records, the trust documents, everything exactly where it should be except one thing, the HOA folder, gone, cleanly removed, meaning someone had been there before me and knew exactly what they were looking for. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started hunting. I called Laura Bennett, a real estate attorney known for dismantling impossible cases, and she arrived the next morning without hesitation, coffee in hand, eyes sharp, listening carefully as I laid out every detail. And together we uncovered the first crack in the story. The land was still bound by agricultural trust conditions, which meant the HOA never had authority to sell it in the first place. And the power of attorney used to justify the transaction was legally worthless. To prove it beyond doubt, I reached out to Ethan Cross, an old friend from my cybersecurity days, who treated the document like a digital crime scene, tracing metadata, timestamps, layers, showing us that it had been created weeks earlier, not years. The signature digitally manipulated, sloppily altered once you knew where to look. It should have ended there. It should have forced everything to stop. Instead, the HOA escalated. Emergency meetings were called. Residents were fed carefully crafted lies about rising property values and community sacrifice. And when I confronted them publicly, Evelyn Crown had security escort me out like a criminal. And digging deeper, we discovered consulting fees flowing from Northline Developments directly into HOA board accounts. Money disguised as advice, but clearly payment. Driven by desperation and instinct, I entered the HOA office after hours one night. And what I found confirmed everything. Long-term collusion, Evelyn's previous employment with Northline, timelines stretching back years, quiet promises, even veiled references to judicial influence. And in my rush to document it all, I made one mistake. I dropped my phone. She found it. From that moment, the pace turned brutal. Permits cleared overnight. Machines tore through soil faster than before. And in court, Judge Keller dismissed every argument we made, brushed aside evidence, called the land abandoned, and allowed construction to continue. And as I walked out of that courtroom, I felt hollow, like the law itself had decided I was expendable. That was when Laura called me back in, holding county statutes like a loaded weapon, her voice steady, controlled, and dangerous. And she said we stop playing defense. We use their rules against them. We let the system they trusted destroy them. The fatal mistake that destroyed them was buried in paperwork no one had bothered to check for years. At the county clerk's office, Martin Hale, a tired but honest man, pulled registration records and boundary maps and pointed to a requirement every HOA feared: mandatory re-registration every 10 years. And there it was in black and white. Renewals in 1996 and 2006, and nothing, absolutely nothing, for 2016. Legally, Silver Creek Estates Association did not exist. Under state land statutes, an unregistered association falls under County Reclamation Authority, meaning its assets can be seized and sold. And we moved quietly, deliberately, using a shell company called Blackridge Holdings LLC to file the petition, securing provisional county control. And before Evelyn Crown even realized what was happening, the sale was executed. The price was $1. The morning letters went out, homeowners opening envelopes in disbelief, realizing their houses were no longer controlled by an HOA, no longer subject to predatory bylaws, but legally belonged to me. And at the community meeting, I stood in front of them, not smiling, not celebrating, explaining everything, offering choices, fair buybacks or entry into a community land trust, transparent finances, democratic control, real protection. When the HOA sued, the case landed before Judge Alana Morris, who ruled plainly that the outcome was the direct result of the HOA's own misconduct. And from there, everything collapsed at once. Judge Keller was suspended pending bribery investigation. Evelyn Crown and HOA attorney Victor Lane turned on each other. Wire transfers surfaced, arrests followed, and Northline Developments withdrew, tearing up concrete and restoring fields they had scarred. Months later, standing on the ranch, watching wheat sway again where machines once stood, I felt something close to peace. Not victory, not revenge, but closure, because I hadn't just reclaimed land. I had broken a system that believed it could steal quietly and win forever. So now I ask you, when power hides behind paperwork, when the law is twisted into a weapon instead of a shield, where do we draw the line between justice and revenge? And if it were your family's land, would you have done the same?